What actually is investing? And I feel like there are so many finance professionals that just make this so overcomplicated. So the whole purpose of this module is basically to break it all down. And once you kind of listen to it, you'll be like, George, is it really that simple? But I'm telling you, it really is. So with investing, what actually is it? So the more kind of formal term is kind of investing is the act of purchasing assets in the hope that they'll increase in value over time or pay you an income. So you're basically hoping that the money you put in, the money you invest, comes out as more money later on. So if you invest £10, you hope that in like 10 years' time, it might be £20, for example. And one key thing here is that it's an expectation and not a promise that you will get your money back. So one thing that people definitely overanalyze is the risk that comes with investment. And don't get me wrong, all forms of investment or investing does have risks, but making informed decisions is going to help minimize that risk. And that's what we're here to learn about today. So mainly by having lots of different investments and different investment styles, which is something we'll cover on in this course, is a way that you kind of minimize that risk. So what does an investor actually look like? And to us, historically, I used to personally think an investor was like a suited and booted man, a bit like the Wolf of Wall Street, scary, in this kind of crowd on the phones, shouting down the phones. But that is certainly not the case. The majority of investors are just like you and I. So, in the polo neck jumpers, female, whatever it might be, not the kind of men shouting down the phone. That's absolutely not it. So investors do come in all shapes and sizes. And to be honest, if you have a workplace pension or a personal pension, you'll see an investor when you look in the mirror. And I think lots of people don't actually realize that. But if you're in a job and you're part of a pension scheme, you are already an investor. So well done. But next slide. So I touched upon this kind of in an earlier module, but even banks invest. So as I said, banks invest the money that you save with them. So everyone is actually investing. So we need to get with the program. So let's say, for example, you have that £1,000 in a savings account. The bank then puts this into investment, for example, that would generate them a 4% return. And in return, they'll give you kind of a 1% interest rate. So the bank is making 3% on the money held within your account. So the main thing is lots of people invest. It's super important to be investing, but there are some kind of key elements that we need to tick off before, which we'll touch on slightly later. But to be honest, it's completely fair to say that investing does have an image problem. So if you've never invested before, you may well think that, it's just for those city slickers with money to burn. Yet when you start to separate the fact from the fiction, investing is actually now more accessible than it ever was before. And it's super important you do this in the correct way and not kind of fall trapped to all these kind of Ponzi schemes. So this is a super important module. Just make sure you're taking notes on him. But firstly, I kind of wanted to shut down a lot of the myths about investing. So firstly, one of the things that a lot of people come to me and say is, Georgia, it's too risky. And of course, there are risks involved with investing. And that's why, it comes with this rather abrupt warning that you may have all heard before. You may not get back what you invest. You're not guaranteed your original capital back. But is it too risky? And before I kind of answer that, we basically need to explore how risk works and what it can mean for you. So all investments can be categorized on a scale of risk. At the extreme end of the spectrum, we've got, those high risk, volatile investments such as cryptocurrency that I'm sure all of you have heard about, or some of you may have dabbled into. But this is classed as extremely high risk. And to be honest, they're not for the faint-hearted, as the value of your original investment can yo-yo all over the place. So this means that, with crypto, you probably heard of these people making a whole load of money, and they were extremely lucky, if I'm honest. But equally, they could potentially lose everything. So it's just being super careful with that. And I will touch upon Bitcoin slightly later on. It's just really important with Bitcoin and those high risk investments. It is essentially gambling. So put on the money that you're happy to lose. But with actual investing and getting the investing fundamentals, this is totally different. So kind of at the more sedate end of the spectrum, you can find some very low risk investments, such as things that are known as cautious funds. These basically invest into, if you invest into one of these, although there's no risk associated with it, the value typically won't fluctuate as much. So this means you can enjoy kind of a much smoother, gentle ride over time. And I'll kind of touch on exactly what a fund is later on and the kind of different investments that we can be looking into to try and avoid as much risk as we possibly can. So whatever your appetite is for risk, there is an investment out there for you to match it. So from the kind of super cautious to the highly adventurous and pretty much anything in between. And I'd say I sit probably somewhere in the middle, if I'm honest. But the key to understanding the risks involved and how they can change over time. And that's where you can make an educated decision as about how much risk is right for you, which is basically what I'm here to help you figure out. So to us, lots of people say, why take any risk at all? Well, in a nutshell, by taking a calculated amount of investment risk, you can basically give your money a greater potential to grow than cash savings. And the important thing to note that you're also taking a risk by keeping your money in cash because it is eroding to inflation. So it's just important to note that everything with money does come with risk. It's just figuring out how much risk we want to take. And that's what we'll run through. The other kind of main misconception that lots of people come to me with is, Georgia, don't I have to be rich, or don't I have to have lots of money? And to be honest, I just want to shut this one down straight away. This is most certainly not the case at all in the slightest. To be honest, if you think about all the rich people in the world, how do you think most of them got rich? A lot of them started investing. And to be honest, the majority of the wealthy people in the world are investing. And you can start with as little as £1. So don't be coming to me and saying, Georgia, I can't afford it, because you can. You can start with £1, and I'm sure, we can all afford to spend £1 if we spend £2 on a coffee. So the next one that lots of people come up to me with is, Georgia, don't I have to lock my money away? And you've probably kind of read or heard that people say investments should be seen as a medium to long-term commitment. Or you might have heard, you should aim to hold it for at least 5 years. And to be honest, this is really sound advice because of the bumpy nature of the stock market, which we'll touch upon. The longer you hold an investment, the more chance you have of smoothing out the bumps and making a positive return. So when you see in a graph, it kind of goes up like this. And the myth that I think a lot of people think about that when you say, okay, well, I've got to invest it for 5 years on the medium to long term, people think, okay, well, that means you actually physically have to lock your money away. And with most investments, your money is not locked anywhere. You can access it. There's no fixed period that you have to invest for. And there are normally no penalties for selling your investment. Pensions are slightly different because you physically can't access them until you're 55. But things like ISAs, which I'll run through later, you can access straight away and at any time. But with that being said, please don't get the impression that you should treat this investment like a separate savings account. So yes, you can get your hands on it, and it might be good for a peace of mind knowing that you can access the money if you had to, but you really don't want to have to rely on this money. And this, the main reason being is because withdrawing early could essentially negatively impact your returns. And the one scenario you desperately want to avoid is kind of being forced to sell when the markets are having a downturn, and your investments might be less worth than what you put in. So for example, if I'm filming this in about October time of 2022, if you're watching this later on, the markets are extremely volatile. And that doesn't give me any discomfort at all. I've got a lot of my money, the majority of my money is invested. So I'm not nervous about it because I know I've got enough set aside in cash. If I need it, I can dip into that. And I don't have to dip into my investments whilst they're down. And that brings me comfort knowing that I don't have to sell my investments whilst they're down. So I haven't actually made a loss. Even though they're down, you only make a loss when you actually sell it. So I'm okay with that. I know I don't need it for the next 5 years. So to be honest, I don't care what the markets are doing right now because I don't need access to it. And I know in my heart of hearts, the markets pretty much always recover. So I can just leave it there. And that's, why one of the most golden rules of investing is making sure you have 3 to 6 months worth of expenses saved in an emergency fund before you start. And, that way, if your car breaks down, or like me, when I just bought a house, my boiler broke, which was delightful, I didn't have to dip into my investments because I did have that cash fund that I could use to replace my boiler, which was really painful. But that's the whole point that it's there for. It just means I didn't have to touch my investments. The other one people come to me is, okay, well, don't you need to be an expert? Don't I need to know everything about finance, know everything that's going on the market? And, if you invest in shares, so single kind of companies, yes, it's probably a good idea to keep your eye on the market, because if one of the companies that you've invested in does badly, you could potentially lose some money. And the price of your share will also be affected by other factors such as, supply and demand, interest rates in the wider economy, all of which will kind of touch on that you need to be aware of. However, investing is not just about buying shares. So for the rest of us, should we say the less expert investors, or like me, a lazy investor, investing in funds, which I'll touch on as what they are, could be a great way to start. Buying into a fund is basically buying into a ready-made, off-the-shelf basket of investments. And they come in kind of many flavors, from the low risk to the high risk. So you can find one that is just right for you. And, you just leave your money within the fund and you don't have to worry about it because you're invested in hundreds of different companies. Some people even thousands of different companies. And also, there are some funds such as what they call a multi-asset fund, which is another really confusing term, which basically just means a broad range of different types of investments, such as bonds, shares, and property, which you may have come across. We will touch upon all those different investments in a later module so you understand how we go about diversifying or spreading our kind of not putting all your eggs in one basket. So to be honest, funds can be less risky than buying individual shares in a single company, because if one of the companies within the fund loses money, it will be balanced out by the other companies within the fund. So it's just spreading your risk. So it's just about being really clever and being a lazy investor like myself and not having to watch everything that's going on. Perfect. And then the next one is obviously, Georgia, do I have to monitor my investments daily? And staying glued to the markets, most of us think, there are much better things that I'd rather be doing with my time, like spending time with friends, family. I don't want to be sat on my phone like, okay, what's going on with the markets? Certainly not like that. And, this is another reason why, those funds are good to invest in, because you don't have to be monitoring it. But the main thing, I don't know if I've already told you guys this, but one of the really interesting sayings that I find from Fidelity is their best performers are either the ones that are, or the investors that are already dead, or the investors that have lost their password. So this basically means they haven't even logged on to their account, so they're not making any panic decisions. And the other thing to note is people say, okay, well, investing is a quick way to make money. And I know you're all really smart, and this is when you already know to be completely false. There is no such thing as a free lunch. So while there are kind of stories of people making money quickly through risky investments, for example, cryptocurrencies, they also don't normally end well either. So, we have those amazing stories of people that made money at the right time, right place. That's absolutely fine. But you've also got people that have invested into crypto at the wrong time and, have lost their life savings. So it's just not going all in with some crazy risk investment, because you can't make quick money. The fact is, to be honest, the market rewards long-term investors, and what's required is not kind of passion, but a cool, calm head and the discipline to stay patient, let your investments grow and work over time. Not to invest into like one high risk hoping that you're going to make money to buy an island at some point. And this is kind of best summarized by, there's a really famous investor that I really like and philanthropist called George Soros. And he said, if investing is ever entertaining, if you're having fun, you're probably not making any money. Good investing is boring. So I'm going to leave you on that one with this slide.